Meghan at the Albert Hall. How many weeks pregnant was she supposed to be? Was it about 8 weeks? And she looks as if she's at least 5 months pregnant.
Buckingham Palace finally ready for a reckoning over the births of Meghan Markle's two children, Archie and Lily.
She's the only woman, as far as I know, if you look at the timeline, who gave birth and then subsequently went into labour later in the day.
For years, debates surrounding royal stories have come and gone, but every so often a familiar topic suddenly returns to the spotlight when an unexpected voice joins the conversation. And that's exactly what happened when royal historian Hugo Vickers shared remarks that quickly sparked fresh discussion among royal watchers. Vickers is not just another commentator offering opinions from the sidelines. He has spent decades studying the royal family and is widely known for his extensive work as a royal biographer.
She had to accept, that the things would be happening on a national level. And that's what the royal family has to accept as well. And most of them understand that. And so you make announcements. You tell people, the child's going to be born. You tell it where it's going to be born. You tell it when it was born. You show the child at a certain point. You tell us who the godparents are going to be. And we all enjoy this. And we're very much then, we, the general public, very much on the side of the person doing that and sort of enjoying it because they are a family at the centre of the nation, and that's all part of it. So to deny us that, I think, was sort of kicking in causing trouble and showing she was going to do it her way, and that's when things began to go wrong.
Over the years, he has become a respected figure within royal circles, with many observers viewing him as one of the most knowledgeable historians covering the monarchy today. Because of that reputation, his comments naturally attracted attention when they began circulating more widely in recent months. During an interview discussing his 2025 book about Queen Elizabeth II, the conversation eventually shifted toward Prince Harry, Meghan Markle, and long-running public discussion surrounding the birth of Archie. While Vickers was careful with his wording, some viewers felt his remarks reflected concerns that have been raised by certain commentators for several years. According to those discussions, questions have often centered on public timelines, official announcements, and details that some critics believe were never fully clarified.
I remember Meghan actually refused to use the hospital that was usually used by royals and refused to use all of the normal medical staff. And there was all of the weirdness over the timing of the birth of Archie. And why it was interesting to me is because, Hugo Vickers is a cautious guy. He's a guy who has very close connections to the royal family. And a lot of what he says, you have to read between the lines.
Vickers referenced elements of the timeline that he personally found difficult to reconcile, while also pointing to the level of privacy that surrounded certain aspects of the announcement. Importantly, these observations reflected his own interpretation of publicly discussed events rather than any verified finding. What caught attention wasn't necessarily the substance of the comments themselves. Similar questions had already been raised by other public figures and commentators over the years. The difference this time was the person making them. For some observers, the story shifted because the remarks were now coming from someone viewed as part of the traditional royal establishment rather than from independent commentators. That's why many royal watchers immediately drew comparisons to comments made previously by Lady Colin Campbell, who had discussed similar concerns in past years. Critics of those arguments had often dismissed them as speculation. However, supporters argued that Vickers' comments added another high-profile voice to an already ongoing debate.
I couldn't care less who the godparents were, but I do think one ought to, why don't you just tell us, So you could see she was had her own agenda. But what I didn't think she would do is to, I never thought she'd stay, to be honest, but I never thought she'd do it in the reign of the Queen, but she was prepared to do that.
The discussion gained even more momentum because Vickers was appearing as part of promotional interviews for his biography of Queen Elizabeth II. The book itself focuses largely on the late monarch's life, drawing on decades of research and personal knowledge accumulated throughout his career. Reviews were generally positive, and the publication received significant attention across British media outlets. Yet despite the book's primary focus being Queen Elizabeth II, public interest quickly shifted toward the comments involving the Sussexes. In many ways, that became one of the most talked about moments from the interview.
Again, I was at The Sun at the time, and I posed a whole load of questions to her team, her communications team, and it never made any sense. They lied. They lied about time. They lied about the location. It was so weird.
Another reason the interview generated discussion was that some of the points Vickers raised had reportedly appeared in earlier media interviews years before, but received relatively little attention at the time. When those remarks resurfaced in later discussions, many viewers began revisiting the topic and comparing different public accounts that had been reported over the years. At the center of much of the debate is a long-standing royal tradition connected to birth announcements. Outside Buckingham Palace, official notices have historically served as part of the public record surrounding major royal family events. Supporters of that tradition view it as an important ceremonial process, while others see it as simply a symbolic custom. And that small but significant detail is where this story begins to move next. Because for many commentators following this debate, the real focus isn't just on individual comments from historians, it's on how official royal announcements are made, why certain traditions matter, and whether departures from those traditions helped create years of questions that continue to generate discussion even today.
She gave birth to them, and she has quite deliberately caused doubt, and she has created mischief, knowing that it would damage the royal family, which would show a level of spite and malice that is truly not only sick, but evil.
To understand why this debate keeps resurfacing, it's important to look at one royal tradition that most people rarely think about. On the surface, it may seem like a simple ceremonial announcement, but for generations it has served as part of the official record surrounding royal births, which is why some commentators continue to focus on it years later. Historically, when a senior royal child was born, Buckingham Palace would display a framed notice outside the palace gates. The document would typically include key details about the birth and would be signed by the medical professionals involved. The practice evolved over centuries as the monarchy sought to provide clear public confirmation of major royal events and avoid confusion surrounding lines of succession. When Prince George was born in 2013, the announcement followed that familiar pattern. The names of the medical team were publicly known, reported by the media, and included in coverage surrounding the birth. The same was true when Princess Charlotte arrived in 2015, and again when Prince Louis was born in 2018. In each case, royal correspondents and photographers covering the events already knew which doctors were involved before the births took place.
All other royal babies in the line of succession have had their births signed off. Princess Eugenie, Princess Beatrice, Sarah York, Diana Wales, Catherine Wales, you name it. Everybody knows where the babies came from, at what time, with proof. The only two children that there is no proof for is Prince Archie Bunker and Princess Lily. You better hope that she's really entitled to what they claim she's entitled to.
Supporters of the traditional process often point out that transparency was one of the reasons these announcements became such an important part of royal protocol. The details were intended to create a clear historical record and provide information that could be independently verified. Then came Archie's birth announcement in May 2019, which quickly became the subject of discussion among some royal commentators. While the notice included information such as the reported time of birth and weight, observers noted that certain details commonly seen in previous royal announcements were not publicly highlighted in the same way. The hospital itself maintained patient confidentiality, which is standard practice for any medical institution. As a result, many details remained private. For some people, that was simply a reflection of Harry and Meghan's desire for greater privacy. Others felt it represented a departure from previous royal traditions and therefore sparked additional questions.
I have spoken to doctors, nurses, many women who've given birth to children, and all of them say the same thing. Those photographs of Meghan and the way the baby bump performed are totally unexpected, and they're not aware of any pregnant woman who is genuinely pregnant having her bump perform the way Meghan's has performed.
It's important to note that no official findings have suggested wrongdoing or confirmed any of the theories that have circulated online. However, the differences between previous royal birth announcements and Archie's announcement became a topic that some commentators continued discussing for years afterward. One of the most prominent voices raising those questions has been Lady Colin Campbell. Since 2020, she has repeatedly discussed the subject through interviews, books, and online commentary. Whether people agree with her conclusions or not, she has remained one of the most persistent figures examining the issue. For years, critics often dismissed those arguments by pointing to Lady Colin Campbell's controversial reputation and outspoken style. Many observers viewed the discussion as remaining largely within a particular corner of royal commentary. That's why the remarks made by Hugo Vickers attracted so much attention among royal watchers. The focus wasn't necessarily on whether the questions themselves were new. Most of them had already been circulating for years. Instead, the discussion centered on who was now raising them.
And another thing that I know that they do, if a royal lady who's about to give birth, there's 2 phone calls that the security team makes. One to the palace to inform Her Majesty that, she's gone into labor. And 2, that to the security, the head of security, to secure the premises where they go. Harry claims that they didn't do any of that. That means that the Royal Police Protection Officers violated security protocol, which will be a...
Vickers has long been regarded as a respected historian with deep connections to royal history and institutions. Because of that, some commentators felt his remarks carried a different level of significance than similar observations made by more polarizing public figures. Of course, not everyone agrees with that interpretation. Many royal analysts continue to argue that differences in protocol can often be explained by changing circumstances, privacy concerns, or evolving approaches within the royal family itself. Others believe certain questions remain unanswered and deserve continued discussion. What is clear is that the conversation changed once a figure like Hugo Vickers entered it publicly. Suddenly, a topic that had previously been associated with a small group of commentators was being discussed through a much wider lens. And that shift became even more noticeable when additional media appearances followed, bringing together figures who had been discussing the same subject from very different perspectives.
It's a matter of responsibility, and I suspect it's such a hot potato that I suspect the resolution will be down the line when Harry and those children will be removed entirely from various situations and positions. That, I think, is going to be the neatest, cleanest way of resolving something rather than any confirmation or expose.
What happened next only added another layer to an already ongoing royal debate. What made this situation stand out wasn't just what was said, it was the reaction that followed. For years, certain royal commentators had been discussing the same topic with little support from figures inside the traditional royal establishment. Then suddenly, a respected historian entered the conversation, and the response from long-time observers was impossible to ignore. After Hugo Vickers' interview began attracting attention, Lady Colin Campbell was asked about his remarks during a separate media appearance. Those who have followed her commentary over the years noticed something unusual. Rather than immediately launching into one of her typically forceful explanations, she appeared to take a more measured approach as she discussed Vickers' observations. Many commentators saw that moment as significant because of the very different positions both figures occupy within the royal discussion space. Lady Colin Campbell has spent years making arguments that often generated strong reactions from both supporters and critics. Vickers, on the other hand, built his reputation through decades of historical research, published biographies, and long-standing connections to royal institutions. Despite their different backgrounds, some viewers felt both had arrived at similar concerns regarding aspects of the public narrative surrounding Archie. That perceived overlap became one of the biggest talking points following the interview. Of course, their language remained very different. Vickers carefully limited his comments to observations and questions based on publicly available information.
Now Harry has opted out. And for what? To be a carer for Archie. So it sounds like she had almost a bit of a premonition that this life in California wasn't going to work out for her grands.
Lady Colin Campbell expressed herself much more strongly, describing the broader controversy as a major issue that she believes deserves closer scrutiny. Those are her opinions, and not everyone agrees with her conclusions, but the contrast in tone between the two figures became part of the story itself. At the same time, attention continued shifting toward Vickers' book about Queen Elizabeth II. The biography attracted considerable interest throughout 2025 and became widely discussed across British media. Reviews focused heavily on the book's portrayal of the late Queen's final years, particularly the challenges and family tensions that reportedly unfolded during that period. Several publications highlighted passages discussing Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's relationship with the royal family. According to reports about the book, Vickers argues that the late Queen experienced significant stress during some of the final chapters of her reign. Those assessments reflect Vickers' interpretation based on his research and conversations gathered over many years. One section that received particular attention involved an anecdote attributed to Queen Elizabeth II regarding Prince Harry's role as a father. The remark was presented as part of a private conversation described in the book. Because the comment was included in a major published biography and reportedly passed legal review before publication, it quickly became one of the most widely discussed passages among royal commentators. What's important here is not necessarily whether every reader agrees with Vickers' interpretation. Rather, it's the fact that these observations are now appearing in a book written by someone who spent decades documenting royal history and interacting with members of the royal family. That distinction matters because discussions that once existed mainly on blogs, live streams, and online forums are now appearing in mainstream publications, newspaper reviews, and best-selling biographies. For many observers, that's where the real shift has occurred. Over the years, anyone who questioned certain aspects of the Archie timeline often found themselves facing immediate criticism.
It's absolutely unbelievable that any member of the royal family could have set about creating what is an international scandal where people have the means as a result of her and her husband's conduct to question whether they have perpetrated the scam of the century upon not only the royal family and the British people, but the other realms of which any heir to the throne is heir to that throne as well.
Supporters of Harry and Meghan dismissed many of those claims as speculation. Others argued there were legitimate questions worth discussing. The debate became deeply divided, with little middle ground between the two sides. But as more established commentators began discussing the subject, some royal watchers felt the conversation entered a new phase. Whether people agree with the concerns being raised or reject them entirely, the topic is no longer being discussed solely by the same small group of voices. And that's why the reaction to Vickers' comments became such a major story. For some, it represented validation of concerns they had followed for years. For others, it simply demonstrated how ongoing royal debates continue evolving as new books, interviews, and perspectives enter the public conversation. One of the most interesting parts of this entire story isn't the debate itself, it's how the debate has evolved over time. In many public controversies, the focus often shifts away from the actual questions being asked and toward the people asking them. And according to many royal observers, that's exactly what happened here for several years. Whenever certain commentators raised concerns about timelines, official announcements, or royal procedures, critics often responded by questioning the credibility of those individuals rather than addressing the underlying claims. Supporters viewed that as avoiding the discussion, while others argued the claims simply lacked convincing evidence. Either way, the conversation frequently became centered on personalities instead of the details being debated. For a long time, Lady Colin Campbell was one of the most visible figures discussing these issues. Because of her outspoken reputation, many people viewed her commentary through that lens. Supporters believed she was asking questions that deserved attention. Critics felt she was promoting speculation. The result was a debate that remained largely confined to a specific section of the royal commentary world. That dynamic began to change when Hugo Vickers entered the conversation publicly. Once again, it's important to note that Vickers did not present any new evidence or claim to have uncovered previously unknown information. The questions being discussed were largely the same ones that had circulated for years. What changed, according to many observers, was the profile of the person now discussing them. Vickers has spent decades building a reputation as a respected royal historian. His work has appeared in major publications, his biographies have received widespread coverage, and he has maintained long-standing connections within royal circles.
And also, why is the belly several shades browner than anywhere else? It's not supposed to be brown.
You think it was a parody because I thought that this was AI. I thought this cannot be real.
The reason I didn't think it was AI is because it looks like the stomach is fake, where the baby, I swear that's the first thing I thought.
Because of that background, some commentators felt his remarks carried a different level of weight than similar observations made elsewhere. Whether that perception is fair or not is open to debate. However, there is little question that the conversation expanded once his comments began attracting wider media attention. Many analysts who follow media coverage of the royal family often describe stories moving through different stages. A discussion might begin on independent platforms, blogs, podcasts, or niche commentary channels. If enough interest develops, larger media outlets may eventually begin covering the same topic. Over time, what was once considered a fringe discussion can become part of a broader public conversation. Some royal watchers believe that is exactly what happened here. Years ago, these questions were mostly confined to a relatively small group of commentators. By 2025 and 2026, however, similar discussions were appearing in best-selling books, major interviews, and mainstream media coverage. Whether readers agree with those discussions or disagree with them entirely, the audience engaging with the topic became much larger. At the center of the debate remains the same collection of publicly discussed events, documents, and announcements that have been analyzed repeatedly over the years. Supporters of the Sussexes argue that many of the claims are built on misunderstandings, assumptions, or incomplete information. Critics maintain that certain details remain unclear and continue to warrant discussion. Importantly, no official investigation or verified finding has confirmed many of the theories that circulate online. That distinction is often overlooked when debates become highly emotional. Still, the reason this story continues attracting attention isn't because the underlying questions have dramatically changed. It's because the list of people discussing them continues to grow. For some observers, the real story is not the theory itself, but the path the conversation has taken. A topic that once appeared mainly in independent commentary spaces eventually found its way into published books, newspaper features, podcasts, and interviews involving well-known royal historians. And that shift may explain why the discussion remains active years after the original events took place. Whether people see the questions as meaningful or unconvincing, the debate has undeniably moved into a much larger arena than where it first began. As a result, what was once treated as a niche royal discussion has become part of a broader conversation about royal transparency, public records, media coverage, and how historical narratives are shaped over time. And for many royal watchers, that evolution may be the most significant development of all. So where does this story go from here? That's the question many royal watchers have been asking ever since Hugo Vickers' comments began making headlines across royal commentary circles. One thing that has become clear is that this debate is no longer being driven by a single voice. Over the past several years, discussions surrounding Archie, royal procedures, public records, and questions about transparency have continued to resurface in different forms. Some commentators believe those questions deserve further examination, while others argue the claims rely too heavily on speculation rather than verified facts.
Hugo is impeccably well connected, and Hugo, unlike me, because you see, Hugo can be chucked out because Hugo's position, so to speak, is entirely related to his royal connections and his social connections in this country, while of course mine aren't. I mean, if I were excluded as a part of the British establishment, I simply have the American and the Jamaican and the international to fall back on. Hugo has none of that. So Hugo is extremely cautious. Hugo, which I am not. I don't need to.
As always, opinions remain sharply divided. What has changed is the level of attention these conversations are receiving. Topics that once existed mainly in niche discussions have increasingly found their way into books, interviews, podcasts, and major media coverage. Whether that trend continues remains to be seen, but many observers are watching closely to see which voices choose to engage with the subject moving forward. Another development that attracted attention recently was the release of the paperback edition of Andrew Lownie's book, entitled. The book had already generated significant discussion following its original release, and additional material included in later editions prompted renewed interest among readers following royal affairs. As often happens with high-profile royal publications, each new release tends to generate another wave of analysis, debate, and commentary. For some people, these books are helping expand conversations that were previously confined to smaller audiences. Others view them as simply adding fresh perspectives to stories that have already been discussed extensively. Either way, they continue fueling public interest in one of the most talked about royal narratives of recent years. The bigger question may not be whether everyone agrees with Hugo Vickers, Lady Colin Campbell, or any other commentator. The real question is how these discussions continue evolving as more authors, historians, journalists, and royal experts weigh in with their own interpretations of events, because that's often how major public stories develop. They don't usually change overnight. Instead, they move gradually through interviews, books, media appearances, and public conversations until they become part of a much larger discussion. Sometimes those discussions eventually fade away. Other times, they continue generating headlines for years. As of 2026, this remains one of those stories that people continue revisiting from multiple angles. Supporters, critics, historians, journalists, and royal enthusiasts all seem to have their own perspectives, and there is little sign of the debate disappearing anytime soon. Now it's your turn to weigh in. Do you think Hugo Vickers' comments marked an important shift in the conversation? Or do you believe the discussion will eventually fade without changing the broader public narrative? Let everyone know what you think in the comments below. If you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to like the video, share it with others who follow royal stories, and subscribe for more celebrity news, royal updates, and major entertainment headlines. Every like and share helps more people discover the channel and join the conversation. And before you go, make sure to check out the next video appearing on your screen right now. If you're interested in celebrity drama, royal controversies, and the stories everyone is talking about, that's the perfect video to watch next. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.